You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dummler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dummler, and joining me today once again, my good friend and co-host, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, glad to have you back, man. Sorry your winless streak with the Broncos continues.
Yeah, man, it's unfortunate, but I still had a pretty darn good time. I mean, 23-3, the score wouldn't indicate a good time, but I enjoyed being there. It's really kind of fun to watch the game in the snow, and my goodness, I'm just happy to have gotten out of there alive. The weather, the snow, I don't think, Kansas City people, if you're listening, that's not that far from Iowa City, but there must be some longitudinal difference between how people can handle the snow between Iowa City and Kansas City, because the amount of cars that were off the road and slipping and sliding, it was insane. We actually didn't get to the game until the very end of the first quarter, get into the stadium, because it was only a 20-minute drive from my sister's apartment to the stadium. It took us 2.5 hours, and it took us about another 3 hours to get out of there. So that was insane. And unfortunately, I guess shout out to Missouri because they don't have an open container law. But I drank a little bit on the car ride there, and did not expect to be stuck in traffic that long. And in a car full of my parents, my sister, my boyfriend, and my wife, I had to use one of those cans again. So the back seat, that was yes. I had better accuracy than the quarterback in that game. Thank God, I scored more than that. So yeah, I definitely, hopefully my mother is not listening. She'll be embarrassed that I shared that to the world. But honestly, that was the Broncos highlight, is the fact that and thank God I had 2 cans. I'll even leave it at that. But we'll move on from there. Yeah. But
I won't share my story. We'll save my story for another day of peeing in a can.
Yeah, but, that was something, and it was a fun game. Obviously, didn't have too much. Honestly, the sad thing, and also, I mean, I don't want to say that we've gotten a loser's mentality here, but my mother walking away, some Chiefs fans were giving her a hard time in her Broncos stuff, and my mom, bless her heart, she had the comeback of, well, at least the Broncos are here, because otherwise you wouldn't have somebody to beat. And I was like, Mom, just don't say anything. You made it 10 times worse. I love you, but just ignore them. They're drunk.
You played yourself.
Yeah, that was it's worse. It's worse now. So, but it was a fun time. 23-3, getting to watch these players, and you can definitely tell walking out of that game that there's just even though the Broncos were won 2 games in a row, and I still think things are heading in the right direction, trending in the right direction. But there's a tier difference right now, maybe multiple tiers between the Broncos and the Chiefs. That was obvious on Sunday, and that's the fact of it. Maybe like Von Miller disappointed after that game. You kind of start to feel yourself after winning 2 games in a row, beating a good Houston team on the road, new quarterback, everything's exciting. Then you crash right back to earth after getting put back in your place by a team as talented as the Chiefs. But as you said on the podcast, which shout out to you, good job holding down the fort by yourself. I listened to it today. The Chiefs, right now, they're trending in the right direction. They have an underrated defense that's been improving, and when you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and the Broncos decimated like they were on the defensive line, and the offensive line dinged up too, that's going to happen. So it's unfortunate right now, lost with their 9th game in a row against Kansas City. But again, I came out of that game not too upset, because I still see the vision with this team for the first time as I've seen it in a long time, and I can see the plan how to get back to the promised land. And maybe it's not Super Bowl 2020, maybe it's not even Super Bowl 2021, but I feel like the trajectory is heading in the right direction, and that makes me feel really good.
I actually had a Chiefs fan today, a huge Chiefs fan. I've never heard him say anything good about the Broncos in my life, and he came up today and he said, Carl, I think you guys got something. And I'm like, we just lost 23-3. But even some of them, I think, might be seeing a little something. So, yeah, I'm with you. There's at least some kind of direction the team is going. How quickly they get to that promised land, we'll have to see. But, it's going to be an interesting offseason. The Broncos can quickly turn things around, and we're going to talk about that a lot. We're excited to, I don't know. It's kind of one of those, you hate to see the season end, but at the same time, then some of the favorite times for us of getting to build the team and see what the Broncos do is coming up. So we're going to talk a little bit about that is coming up here in this episode even. But I want to make sure that you can find us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dummler MHH, and of course Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Also know that this podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Well, Nick, as down as Bronco fans maybe are this week from everything that's happened with losing to the Chiefs after some promising times, at least we're not the Detroit Lions. Can we say that?
Yes, and thank God for that. You know, like some people really like the kind of the gruffness of Vic Fangio and whatnot. However, I think he's got a little bit of a dry sense of humor to him. You know, that kind of works right. It's kind of, you know, he's the funny, somewhat curmudgeon-y grandpa in his interviews, but listening to Detroit media and even, you know, the fans, Matt Patricia, gosh, that guy has the personality of a box of wet rags. Like, it's not good.
And he'll be back in 2020.
Yeah, it's
that has been confirmed. So I'm sorry, Detroit Lion fans. At least, again, Bronco fans, it can be worse.
Yes, it can.
And I saw this stat today that I thought was fitting for where we are in our culture today. It has been two presidents being impeached since the Lions last won their division. So some of us are upset that the Broncos haven't made the playoffs in 4 years, and rightfully so. But at least we've won the division since Clinton. We've won. Well, we've actually won a couple Super Bowl. Well, I guess the Super Bowls would have been happening right when he was getting impeached, right?
Yes, I think that's
around that
probably
time.
About right. I was very young.
Yeah, so. That was it's hard to even remember those times. I just remember my dad telling lots of probably not appropriate jokes, so I'll leave those out. But anyway, yes. So this is not a good team. 3-10-1. They've lost 7 straight games, 10 of their last 11 games, and really, you think about it, they were actually looking pretty good to start off the season.
They had that game against the Chiefs where
they should have
won it.
Should have. And then they played a lot of their games early in the season, pretty darn close. But then Matthew Stafford going down, huge blow. He is such an underrated quarterback in the NFL.
You got to feel a little bit bad for him.
It's been, well, you think about 2 of their best players in their entire franchise history, both of them retired early.
Yeah.
I mean, they got tired of losing, and I understand that all too well. Again, Bronco fans were tired of losing for 4 straight years. I guess it's only been 3. I guess we did have the 9-7 season and missed the playoffs. But no, this is as bad as the Broncos have been. Detroit's been worse. And so this is kind of one of those games where the Broncos actually are going to be a favored team, which is crazy to say.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos we've been complaining about the health. Broncos have been healthier than the Lions, and it's kind of sad. They have some players that I like, but I mean, TJ Hawkinson out for the season. The defense has been just totally failing, and people scream about using high resources at linebacker for the Broncos, but that doesn't necessarily mean your linebackers are going to be good. And the Lions linebackers have been just simply put, pretty dreadful. So this is a bad team. There's a reason the Broncos are favored by a good amount. And, Drew Lock didn't have the best game. Elements weren't great. The offensive line struggled. But if you wanted to find a get-right game for the Broncos after going on the road and getting beat like that by the Chiefs, this is probably the team you're putting on the schedule. Like, it's about as ideal as it can get.
Yep. Broncos are favored by 7 is
That's
where the
insane.
spread's at right now. So, yeah, after they lose 23-3, they're favored by 7.
Yeah. Yeah, they're bad. Not a lot of parity this season. It's like talking about the draft order. It's like the Broncos could win this week and drop like all the way to 16, I think. And it's like, this Broncos team's not very good, but like there are a lot of bad teams.
Yep.
So, ugh.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's, again, like you said, you got to look around the league, and things are not always as bad as they seem sometimes. So getting to the Lions, just looking at them, again, you have to kind of keep these stats, especially on the offensive side. You almost have to divide them into Matthew Stafford when he was playing and now post Matthew Stafford, because it's two very different teams. With Matthew Stafford,
between a competent quarterback and a non-competent quarterback.
Right.
I mean, it just shows you how much of a difference maker even having that baseline is there. It's like, imagine if the Broncos had to go through almost, since Thanksgiving with a worse version of Brandon Allen. Barf.
Yep. It's crazy looking at some of the stats of how good actually Matthew Stafford was this year. And then all of a sudden you see how bad things fall apart. Just to give you an idea of where they were at with Matthew Stafford, he had 106 quarterback rating. He'd be top 5 in the NFL right now. 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Since then, their two quarterbacks, David Blough and Jeff Driscoll, have 7 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. So, just again, how quickly things have fallen apart. They're both at least 2 yards less per attempt. Yards per game, you're talking about a huge drop off. They've really had to rely on the deep pass game to even stand a chance in scoring some points. They can't get any kind of consistent offense going, which I guess Broncos fans, we should understand that a little bit, because that's been obviously the struggle of the Broncos this year too.
Yeah, they are not great. The only thing about this team that I kind of like is some of the pieces that they have on the offensive line. But again, I think I can't even remember. This might have been our conversation before we started recording. But if you don't have the defense and the weapons and the quarterback and the running backs, your offensive line can only take you so far. A great example, I think, is those early Browns team from about a decade ago, a little less than that. They had Mitchell Schwartz. They had Joe Thomas. They had Alex Mack. That team was horrible. So it really, it takes a team. Everybody likes to talk about the offensive line with Denver. I get it. But, man, looking at this, Taylor Decker, good player. Frank Ragnow, I love their center, Frank Ragnow.
Yep.
Spent big money on Ricky Wagner. It's not helping. This is not a good team.
Right. You're right. They've invested big time in that first-round pick with Taylor Decker. And like I said, bringing in...
And Ragnow.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. And like I said, it just... When you lose a quarterback of that caliber and Matthew Stafford, things fall apart real quickly. And so again, offensive stats, I could quote them to you, but it really just doesn't show where this team's at. So I'm going to focus more on the defensive stats here, just because these kind of they've been the same throughout the entire year. And they are not a good defense. Like you said, if there's a get right game for this offense after such a bad showing, this is the game. They are 31st in total yards allowed at 401.9, 26th in points allowed per game at 26.6, 31st in passing yards allowed, 288.6, 28th in third down defense at 44%, quarterback rating allowed 102.4. That's good for 30th in the league. Rushing yards allowed 113.2, 18th in the league. The one stat that they're good at is yards per rush at 4.0. They're 6. But teams are kind of going, well, we get these big leads and then we can stand just getting 4 yards a carry.
Yeah.
It's
At that
okay.
point, you're just taking the air out of the ball.
Right, exactly. So right now they are 19th in offensive ranking on DVOA and 26th in defensive DVOA. So again, just not a good team on either side of the ball right now. Don't really have the weapons. There's really only a couple weapons that they have. Their running back room.
Marvin Jones is out for the year, I think, as well.
Yeah.
That's
so Danny Amendola. Okay.
Blast from the past. I do love Kenny Golladay.
Yeah, he has been good.
Awesome. But again, it's Calvin Johnson syndrome. Can't do it alone.
Right.
So
and then they lost TJ Hawkinson, your boy.
Yeah.
And their backup tight ends are terrible blockers. Logan Thomas, Jesse James, they've been terrible blocking this year, and receiving wise don't really offer much either. So it's kind of one of those, you shut down Kenny Golladay and you stand a pretty darn good chance of winning this game. I mean,
Yeah,
I'll talk about that
a little bit.
Yeah.
David Blough?
Yeah.
I have a little bit of an insight on David Blough. Got to watch him the past season. I think it was a 4 or 5-star recruit, went to Tennessee, and then grad transferred last year to Purdue, where he had a pretty good season, but granted, half the playbook was get the ball to Rondale Moore. And he's an okay athlete, and he does a good job distributing the football, but it's the Trevor Siemian syndrome, where the arm talent is just so not there that it limits the windows, the type of throws that they can make. And then teams, once they take away the run and they force him to kind of have to make some big boy throws, the offense falls apart. So David Blough, probably a fine quarterback as far as a backup third string, a rookie guy here, but not what you want. And we are a snap away from seeing Kyle Sloter, which honestly, not cheering against David Blough by any means, or definitely not cheering for injury, but I am so here for Kyle Sloter coming into Denver and just getting taken down a few times, just because there's still the fans that say Denver should never have gotten rid of Sloter. So I just want to emphatically stamp that close, and this is a game that we have a chance to do that.
I've seen the same thing for the Colts.
Kelly?
Yeah, with Chad Kelly, where people still keep calling for him. And they're going, we don't even, the Colts, they've had injuries. And I mean, obviously, with Luck retiring, Brissett has been banged up a little bit this year, and they still won't even bring him onto the roster. So I think that should close the book on Chad Kelly and being a true potential starting quarterback in the NFL. But you always have those people that just hang on thinking, I was right. You were wrong. This guy is something. But you're right. This is one of those games. Just offensively, they just don't have the pieces to do much damage, especially with a limited quarterback. I mean, the Broncos saw it when they had to have some backups, and even with Joe Flacco, some of the limitations that they had in that scenario. But I'm excited to kind of get to the coach's corner and talk about some of those things. But any other stats for you that kind of stick out here when we're talking about Detroit that kind of say, okay, this is who they are, and this is where the Broncos can take some advantage of them?
Well, for me, here, give me 1 second. Actually, I can pull something up.
Well, I can give you one here that I think is very interesting. Detroit is 1-8 against the spread in their last 9 games.
Woof. I think that tends to happen when a team kind of starts off okay, and then absolutely just poops themselves down the stretch. So they still are kind of carrying the perception of how good they were to start the season or how they played, and then they fall off.
Right.
So that's my thought process.
Right. And then the other part of this is the total has gone over in 8 of Detroit's last 12 games, not because of Detroit. They are leaking points more and more as the season progresses. Yeah. It's just been, like I said, I mean, they've suffered injuries just like the Broncos have, and you only have so much talent. And when they started with average talent at best, and they've lost some very key players, that's exactly where they've reached. And so, they've been giving up points left and right, even to some pretty bad teams. I mean, you think about they played Washington, lost 19-16, not a great team. Dallas, when they were going through their pretty bad stretch there, somehow Dallas still won against them. Tampa Bay just crushed them this last week. Yeah. So again, this is just, I'm not trying to say the Broncos are a great team, because I know then we're setting it up where all of a sudden Detroit comes in and has some kind of crazy game and beats the Broncos. It's possible. I mean, Broncos obviously didn't look good this last week either, so I don't think they have much room to talk, but it is. It's just kind of one of those games where I think Broncos really have quite a few advantages in this one. Yeah, and looking at the just fantasy rankings here about how the Lions defense has done against different units. They've actually done okay against tight ends this season, but they have really struggled against wide receivers, and specifically that of wide receiver twos. So looking at guys like, the DaeSean Hamiltons, the Tim Patricks, guys that probably are better served as third or fourth wide receivers on most teams.
they have a chance just because of the inadequacy of the Lions' cornerback depth chart. I mean, they're bad. There's a reason this team is being continually mocked Jeffrey Okudah in the top 10, because outside of Darius Slay, their cornerbacks have been absolutely trash. I mean, Rashawn Melvin has been in the league for a while, but not good. Justin Coleman, not great. Jamal Agnew. So this is just a really, really, really bad group of cornerbacks outside of Darius Slay. So pretty much I'm expecting Darius Slay to be up against Cortland Sutton almost exclusively if they can do that. But the way this defense is shaped, they need man corners back there, and they just don't have the bodies. So I think that the inadequacy of the Lions versus wide receivers. I mean, let's see what they've given up this year. They are the 6th worst defense in football when it comes to giving up receiving yardage, giving up 313 targets, 190 receptions, 17 touchdowns, and 2,676 yards. So you really have struggled there. They've also struggled against running backs in the pass game. Actually, one of the worst, the 4th worst defense in terms of passing yards to the running back, and they've given up 8 touchdowns to the running back, tied for a league high. So kind of areas where if you read my piece that just came out, you probably haven't got a chance to read it yet, but I just published a little bit ago about how the Broncos, they really need not only wide receiver to step up, wide receiver outside of Cortland Sutton, but they need more from the running backs and the non-Noah Fant tight ends in this pass game if they're going to replicate more of the 49ers, Vikings, Mike Shanahan style West Coast offense. But this is an opportunity where, even though, Royce Freeman, Phillip Lindsay haven't been the best in the pass game, and you haven't seen the best from Tim Patrick or DaeSean Hamilton, this is one where if they do not at least play okay, now you're really starting to panic, because the Lions have been horrible there.
Do you know who's given up the most touchdowns on their team, on their defense, passing wise?
I'm not sure.
Justin Coleman has given up 7 touchdowns on the season.
Not great.
Nope.
Yeah,
and allowed a quarterback rating of 108.4.
So again, they're wide receiver 2. Very bad. So Tim Patrick / DaeSean Hamilton, today's your lucky day. Now, that being said, I hope the Broncos do utilize Noah Fant more. I mean, what did he have last week? 3 targets. That's not enough. He's essentially the Broncos' second best. He is the Broncos' second best pass weapon. So he needs to get more than 3 GD targets. But injury probably has a little bit to play with that. But
right, I was going to say he missed a little bit of that game.
Yeah, so. Still, I don't know. I mean, he's doing the most with the least of anybody on this team as far as the touches. So something to be said there, and a good sign for the rookie tight end. So all right, well, we should probably take a break here. We're going to get back. Don't go anywhere. This is Building the Broncos.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Building the Broncos. I am Nick Kendell along with Carl Dummler, here to talk the Broncos going up against the Detroit Lions, 2 teams that are competing for last place in their division. Unfortunately, actually, probably the Lions aren't competing so much as they are set to go there, but man, it feels good to go into a game where this is probably the game, and we knew this going into the season even. We talked about it like the last 2 weeks, maybe the easier of any of the Broncos games this season, but this is probably the biggest spread the Broncos have had all season in terms of being the favorite. Like, this is a bad Lions team. They're very injured, but they're also just not good.
Yeah, it's when you're on your 3rd string quarterback, which I guess we can't be saying much because the Broncos are on their 3rd string quarterback too. It's just kind of I don't know. It's where it's at, and it shows on their team. They just are so limited on really both sides of the ball because they just don't have the players to keep up even with average teams. And so I figured I would start today just because I got maybe the easier matchup. Well, I don't know. We both have. It's kind of since they're since they're bad on both offense and defense. But I figured since you got the offense and this is a get right game, I would start off here. And so Detroit Lions, again, offensively, they have one great playmaker, Kenny Golladay, and obviously the Broncos are going to have to do a lot to make sure that he is not the guy that beats them. It's kind of the old, I guess, Bill Belichick. I mean, maybe we shouldn't be trying to emulate him after more and more cheating scandals that come out. But still, it's you take away what they're good at. You take away their strengths and make them beat you with a weakness. And right now for Detroit, because they just have so few of weapons, really it is kind of shut down Kenny Golladay and you got a really good chance of winning this game. And especially a quarterback like David Blough coming in, he's going to want to lean on his top target for sure. And this is one of those games also, their running back room is banged up. Do you know who their leading rusher was last week?
No idea. I do know that Kerryon Johnson is supposed to be back this week.
He is.
I saw that on Twitter. Yeah.
And Bo Scarborough is supposed to maybe play. So, I mean, it'll be a little bit better, but they're both still banged up. Last week, it was Wes Hills.
Gesundheit.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Where did he go to school? I feel like it was like Slippery Rock or something.
Delaware.
Okay. Well, I knew it was small. I think he was a Shrine Bowl guy.
So close. Yeah. But no.
I don't want to toot my own horn, Carl.
Yeah.
He transferred from Delaware to Slippery Rock.
Oh,
and
man.
he was the MVP of the Collegiate Bowl last year and was called up to the Senior Bowl and had 2 carries for 22 yards before he got hurt and left. But for some reason, West Hill and Slippery Rock stuck out in my mind. So that's
there
somewhere in the resources of my mind. And I can't even remember somebody's name immediately after they tell me that. But gosh darn it, I know West Hill went to Slippery Rock. So the human mind is amazing. Continue.
Okay. So again, this is a pretty banged up team, and they have a decent offensive line, like you've already hinted at. They've been above average, I'd say, especially considering the situation that they've been put in. They're not a great run blocking group for the most part. They're much more on the pass blocking side of things, but even there, you can get after these quarterbacks, and especially after David Blough, when he is pressured, without bringing the blitz. He has a 37% completion percentage and has 0 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, a 15.7 quarterback rating.
Not great.
Didn't even know you could be. Yeah, didn't even know you could be that low.
And that's crazy because he had a pretty good game that Thanksgiving one. So that just has to point to just how absolutely horrific he has had to have been since then.
Right. And then he is a quarterback that you can get after with blitzing. I mean, any kind of young quarterback, you're going to see a lot of teams try to bring pressure, just like the Chiefs did against Drew Lock, and say, hey, either see your offensive line hold up, see this guy make a mistake. Right now, he has a 52.3 completion percentage when he's blitzed. And then he has 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a 63.9 quarterback rating when he's blitzed. So again, this is a game where you can let the dinosaur roam, let him eat. And go see what he can do. Now, what you're going to try to do with David Blough, you're going to try to take away the deep right side of the field and deep middle, because that's where he wants to go with the football. He does want the big play. I mean, he has been actually pretty good about throwing the deep ball. His arm is limited, but that is where he's trying to get the football, because they really can't have a consistent offense that they are trying to find that. And so take away the deep ball, keep everything in front of you, and make them have to march down the field. Now, the Broncos have actually been pretty good about that until last week. Even there, the Broncos did okay other than a couple plays, if you really think about it. They kept everything in front of them. I mean, they gave up a lot of passes because Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. And he's a very, very good quarterback, obviously. But no, that's what I would do in this game. It really is kind of one of those, make that guy make a mistake. Yeah. Because he's going to. I mean, he's been terrible this year. And he had his one really good game, like you said, on Thanksgiving, where he had some great, huge plays down the field. But since then, it's not been very pretty. And so if you can really take away the run game, keep him in the pocket. That's another thing that you're trying to do. Make sure that he doesn't have any ability to escape and find those deep balls down the field. And then just make sure that you're a very sound tackling team. This isn't a very complicated game plan that you have to stop this guy. I really don't think that this is one where you're sitting there in the film room going, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Like last week. And so, I mean, I think you can hold them to 10, 17 points tops. They might get a couple big plays here and there, but otherwise you can force quite a few big plays for the defense, where they could have an interception, Justin Simmons can keep padding his stats just to show how much of a snub of him not getting into the Pro Bowl really was. Just had to get that shot in there. Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, like I said, this is an easier game for the Broncos. Force him to throw to his left. He has not been good throwing to his left. 16 of 28, 147 yards, 1 touchdown to 2 interceptions, a quarterback rating of 53.72 when he's throwing to his left. So, oof. I mean, again, take away what he's good at, what he's comfortable in, make him have to throw to where he's uncomfortable. And again, I think you can have a big play, a big interception return for a touchdown or something like that. And I think your pass rushers can get home with some big plays with some blitzes as well.
Well, for me, this defense doesn't really do too much for me. I do think that the defensive line has some talent. But pretty much you just can't let Trey Flowers beat you. Outside of him, the pass rushing upside is negligible, almost none. I mean, Trey Flowers obviously a good player, really good with the New England. Detroit probably overpaid to get him, but again, Matt Patricia being a New England disciple wanted a New England guy because he knows the system, know he could fit in there. But been okay. If you can stop Trey Flowers, though, the rest of it shouldn't be too bad. Ashawn Robinson and Damon Harrison are really going to be good tests for the interior offensive line for the Broncos in the pass game, or in the run game, because those guys can really eat up space. I mean, they're thick, they're strong. Snacks Harrison, one of the better run-stuffing, one-tech, zero-techs in the league, but really neither of those guys offer much as a pass rusher. And then Romeo Okwara, the other edge rusher, not much there. So I really do not respect this defensive front as far as pass rushing goes. They don't really have any sort of speed or explosiveness in that area. And Trey Flowers, he's a power rusher. He can be versatile there, but it's not enough. It's not enough at all. The second level of the defense, I mean, they've got Christian Jones, who's always been an athlete at one of the outside linebacker spots. Early draft pick, Florida State, played for the Bears for a while, but never really had the mental side of the game. Struggles to process, especially in zone. They have the third linebacker taken last year in the draft, and Jahani Taivai from Hawaii. I probably butchered that first name, but I remember versatile guy.
Is it Jelani?
Jahlani. Jelani. We'll go with that.
Okay.
Tavai. I know I pronounced that one right. He's been okay this year. He can come off the blitz and everything, but a lot of people felt like that was a reach there as far as his skill set goes. And he's been up and down this season. Probably the best they have there in that second level, but not very good. They're missing Jared Davis, who's been a first-round pick of theirs from a couple years ago and been massively disappointing for them. Good athlete, but kind of weak at the point of attack and not a little bit stiff. He's more linear, doesn't have the most oily hips. So that's been an issue in coverage. And then Devon Kennard, the other linebacker there, is not great. I do like Jalen Reeves-Maybin as a backup guy, speedy, but he's never been the same since he got injured his sophomore year at Tennessee. And then the second level, I mean, here it's pretty much just Darius Slay. So looking at this team, the main thing is I am attacking the middle of the field when I can. Noah Fant, getting him in space when I can. And if that means taking Darius Slay away from where that's at with, Cortland Sutton being a little bit of a, dare I say, a decoy, that's okay. But really, it's a Drew Lock get right game. I mean, this is a terrible defense, and the Broncos should have chances to hit opportunities with big pass plays, specifically big pass plays, and wide receivers not covered by Darius Slay. Now, Darius Slay's been having a down year of sorts. He's still good, but it's just their other guys in that back seven are just so bad. So I'm hopefully, if I'm Scangarello, and I don't know if Drew Lock is up for this yet, but I'm using a lot of pre-snap motion to indicate to Drew Lock and, the entire offense of what coverage the defense is playing before you get going. If the guy follows, it's probably man. If they kind of are switching and whatnot and rotating a little bit, shifting over, it's probably zone. And that can kind of tell you where to go, where to attack. But there should be ample space in this game. And I'm also really looking forward to, again, talked about the piece I wrote that just came out a little bit ago. But man, the Broncos, this offense really needs a running back to get utilized and get going in the pass game. Now, whether that be Royce Freeman, Devontae Booker, Phillip Lindsay, I don't know. I don't even know if they have that guy that they want there long term. But there's chances to be had in this game with running backs. If you can get past the defensive line here, these linebackers are not good. So, man, that's where I'm looking to attack. Unfortunately for Denver, the areas that this Detroit defense tends to do the best against is wide receiver 1, Darius Slay, big reason for that, and against tight end 1, Noah Fant. So that's two areas that the Broncos are the strongest at in offense, at least, if you're going to utilize your weapons. And still, Courtland Sutton and Noah Fant, shown enough, you still need to get them in the game. They can't just be decoys. You don't have enough weapons elsewhere to take them out of the game and just pick on other weaknesses of that defense. But still, I think there's going to be ample opportunities. I think the biggest thing is Drew Lock just playing within himself, not trying to do too much, go execute the game. And, I'm not expecting another game like the Texans, but if he can go out there and execute like he did against the Chargers, which are 3 times the defense of this Lions team, there should be no issue. So hopefully I'm hoping to get a lead early, and then the Broncos kind of take their foot off the gas, play the game flow kind of thing a little easier, because, again, you think David Blough, if you let David Blough come back, if you're up by 10 points and then their offense comes screeching back, there's more issues here than conservative play calling by Rich Scangarello and the Broncos offense. So overall, this might come back to bite me in the butt, but this is a defense I've probably respected the least on paper and watching the film as any of I've watched the Broncos go up against in quite some time. They don't have a lot of guys. The only person on this team that I would take on the Broncos, I would probably take Damon Harrison, just because I do like Snacks Harrison. He's funny. And I'd obviously take Darius Slay, but the rest of them, woof, not good. And this should be, again, a get-right game for Drew Lock. And luckily for the Broncos, the Raiders not a great back seven either. Broncos got a chance to end the season on a high note as far as the offensive output and the trending direction for Drew Lock. I
like it. Yeah, no, I'm with you. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if he goes out and has even a better game than he had against the Chargers.
Yeah. I'm hoping for a better game against the Chargers, but he had a pretty good game against the Chargers. I feel like they definitely took the foot off the gas a bit and didn't try to put too much on his plate.
Right.
But this is, the Chargers defense, you were talking about the Lions offense. You need to kind of look at it contextually in a pre and post Matt Stafford kind of era. Probably the same with the Chargers with Derwin James. That's a game changer for a reason. That's a blue chip player for a reason.
Right.
So I don't respect this Lions defense. It's simple as that. They're not very good, and I don't want to gas up the Broncos' chances this week too much, especially for the offense to put up more than 24 points. But if they don't put up more than 24 points, it's going to be very disappointing, because there's really no reason for it with how bad this Lions defense is.
Right. No, I'm with you. This is a game where they can actually take a few deep shots because they just don't have that pass rush to get home. Yeah. That Drew Lock can actually feel comfortable in the pocket. And I guess I'd be a little bit worried if he does struggle to feel comfortable in the pocket.
Yeah.
Of what that means. I know, maybe it is a little bit of, I just got hit how many times? 10 times, I think it was, in that Chiefs game. And
too much.
Yeah, it felt like it was a lot more than that. But no, I think this should be one of those games where he can really feel comfortable. And when he feels comfortable, watch out. I think that's when things just go crazy for him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's a rhythm thrower right now, and we could see that last week where some of the throws were like, where the hell was that going? But other ones are gorgeous. He's kind of erratic right now. It comes back to consistency with the technique, and when things start to get ugly and muddy, he goes back to what he knows and what's comfortable for him. And sometimes that leads to poor technique, which leads to poor accuracy, which we saw on Sunday. Granted, the conditions weren't the best, but it's not like it was windy. Luckily, thank God. Gosh, that would have been miserable. But that's it's just something to note. It's all part of the sample size. Can't completely throw the game away, but worth noting. So probably should take another break here. We will be right back to talk the rest of this Broncos game, and if we have some time, some draft stuff as well. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on Building the Broncos. I'm Nick Kendell along with Carl Dummler. Carl, I think we should get right into the superlatives and then tack off the end of the episode with a little bit of draft talk for the folks that aren't as interested in it. People, we're draftaholics. There's no doubt about it. We love that stuff, but a lot of people come here just to listen about the upcoming game. So we'll save the draft stuff for the end. But first, Carl, Broncos win if.
Broncos win if, well, you already talked about it with the second and third wide receivers having some opportunities for some big plays in this one. So I'm going to take one from what you had, was it 2 weeks ago? Where if any other Bronco receiver other than Noah Fant or Courtland Sutton has over 50 yards receiving.
Oh, man, probably get 49 now, just because that's the curse.
It's true.
I'm going to go the Broncos win if they score more points than the Lions. I know I'm going out on a ledge here. No, I'm just kidding. I think the Broncos are going to end up winning this game if Drew Lock throws at least 2 touchdowns. I think they're going to be able to get the ball in the end zone here, and I think 2 touchdowns from Drew Lock. Maybe that's setting the bar kind of higher than it needs to be. They could probably get by only if he had 1, but I think they're definitely going to win if Drew Lock gets 2. So I'm really leaning into the bounce back game. I've said it 10 times, or 30 times already. So I'm going with that.
Okay.
So the Broncos lose if
they give up 100 yards or more rushing. And this is kind of twofold. One, because their running backs are banged up, if they could get going and get 100 yards, that's not a good look for this Bronco defense. And 2, usually that probably means that they're at least in the game or leading the game, that they can rush that much. And so that's not good for the Broncos. They need to be able to get out to that lead like they've done in their 2 of their last 3 wins there with Drew Lock. When they can get out to that early lead, that's when they can really put pressure on other teams. And so they definitely need to see that run game cut off pretty early.
All right, well, that's a good one. And you talked about the Lions' offensive line not being the best run blockers, and it comes back to stuff we've said on here multiple times, but I do want to give a shout-out to Frank Ragnow because he is a tremendous run blocker. I mean, he's absolutely an ass planter, as they say. Or what do they say, an ass butt, or an ass gardener, where he plants butts in the ground constantly because he takes dudes to the ground constantly in the run game. I mean, he's one of the most physical interior offensive linemen I can recall in a long time, but with the guards being as bad as they are, and the running back issues, it's not good for them. So for me, I'm going to go with the Broncos offensive line here. I say if they give up 10 plus pressures, it's a bad game. Again, we talked about how just the lack of pressure that this team has. They don't really have any guys who can win in their own. They have to scheme up pressure. And with the Broncos' issues on the right side of the offensive line, that's possible. I mean, Austin Schlottman, Elijah Wilkinson, not great. Not great, as they say, the last few games. So I'm concerned there, absolutely. But I think that if they give up 10 plus pressures, they'll lose. I don't think that's going to happen, though, this week. I think the Broncos should be able to control things a little bit more. They're not going to fall behind, 9-0 the first 2 drives like they did against the Chiefs. So 10 plus pressures, I'm worried, but I don't think that'll happen.
All right. Well, MVP if they win.
I'm going to go Drew Lock. A little boring, but again, I'm all in on the Drew Lock bounce back game. So I think he's going to have a good game. I think it won't be totally clean. I don't think the stats are going to match the Texans' performance, but coming back home, this team doesn't seem to have lost too much resolve losing to the Chiefs. I mean, the season was pretty much already over, despite Von Miller's, coming back down the post-game press conference. That's always kind of a little bit of a downer, but I think this team's going to be excited to come back home and finish off on a high note. So I think, and a lot of that's going to depend on Drew Lock. So I'm going to lean into it. Drew Lock, MVP if they win.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with Phillip Lindsay.
Okay.
I'm going to go the other possibly easy choice, I guess you could say. And last game only gave him 7 carries, and he still averaged 4.6 yards per carry. He wasn't actually too bad, but just because they fell behind so early, they just completely abandoned their game plan. I think this is one of those weeks where they learn from their past mistake of abandoning things too quick, and they really try to focus on the run game and really getting Phillip Lindsay involved. So I think he's going to have a 100-yard game. I think he might have a couple rushing touchdowns. I think this is Phillip Lindsay's best game of the season.
All right. Well, they need to get him to 1,000 yards, so they might be leaning on him pretty hard here down the stretch. Maybe, just maybe, they can get him there the end of this game. I doubt it. I don't know how many more yards yet. I know that he's just on pace to miss, so we'll see. But, season's over. Phillip Lindsay's a guy this team really likes, the locker room really likes. I could see them doing everything they can and more to get Lindsay to 1,000 yards because that does matter to the players and whatnot. And that's something you can hang your hat on this season, at least. For me, the GOAT, if they end up losing, talked about him here, but again, I talked about this Lions defense is one that I don't really respect too much, but one of the players we know is pretty good is Trey Flowers. And guess what? He's going to be going up against probably the biggest issue on this Broncos offense this season in Elijah Wilkinson. I feel bad for Wilkinson. I think he's a guard playing tackle, and he's being forced out of position for a unit that just doesn't have the depth that they want. But he's been struggling, and Trey Flowers is a good player. Obviously not as good as he was last year, but still a really good player. So that's one that scares me a lot. And if the Broncos end up losing this, I think Trey Flowers beating up on Elijah Wilkinson will have a lot to do with it.
Well, I'm going to go Mike Purcell. Just because he is kind of that man in the middle trying to stop the run game. And I already said that Broncos will lose if they give up quite a few rushing yards. And Purcell hasn't been at his best these last couple weeks. It's just been some of his worst play on the field for sure. He needs to bounce. He does. He definitely does. And so he needs a bounce back game. And like you already said, he's going against one of their better players on that Detroit team and Frank Ragnow. So, kind of a tough matchup for him, but if he can even be an average player in this game, I think the Broncos win. But I think this is one of those matchups he's outmatched.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. Unsung hero for me, I'm going to go with Tim Patrick, wide receiver 2. You kind of saw him step up in that Vikings game, and he's been okay since then, but I think this is a game where, again, you talked about how much Justin Coleman, the cornerback opposite of Darius Slay, has been just dreadful this season. That sounds like a prime chance for Tim Patrick to step up. So I don't know how unsung he'll be in regards to after the game, because wide receivers are one of the positions that they'll let you know when they're good. Everybody knows when they're good. Stats back it up. But I think going into this game, wide receiver 2, Tim Patrick, in my book, he's wide receiver 2 over DaeSean Hamilton. I think he's the guy who could be the unsung hero and the difference maker in this game.
All right. I'm going to go, man, that was going to be mine too. So, no, I'll go Isaac Yiadom.
Okay.
I think this game sets up well for him. He's going to have a decently easy matchup being the cornerback 2. I'm sure Chris Harris will be following around Golladay. So I think this is a game where he could maybe get that first big interception of the year for him and really get some people going, what happened to, where'd he come from? Like, what? This is not the same guy that we saw earlier in the year. And I know some people I saw on Twitter.
Buried him.
I know they did. And he had that pass interference call and everybody's going, oh, there's the guy we know. I'm going, it's one play. Like earlier in the year, yes, I would have agreed, but he's actually been playing a little bit better, looking like a guy that knows what he's doing on the field, looking a little more confident. And I think this could be one of those games where he really shows well for the Broncos.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. So final score, I'm going to go with the Broncos winning this one. I'm going to give them, wow, they're really going to bounce back in this one. I think they're going to blow out the Lions. I think the Broncos are going to win this game 34-17. Go Broncos.
Okay, I'm going to go 30-13 Broncos win.
Oh, wow. So we both think the Broncos are going to win this game by a lot.
Yeah, I just home game for the Broncos, coming off a pretty bad loss. I think they want to really come out, have a good game, just show that they're not giving up on the season. I mean, Drew Lock, he's been an Energizer Bunny. I know that didn't show up as much last week. I don't know. There's just so much of that game. It feels like some of it can't completely be thrown out, but it can. Because there's just a lot of things that were working against the Broncos in that game. And so I'm just going to consider that more of an anomaly than a real showing of where this team is at. Because they've played both games really close, even against tough teams. And the Chiefs seem to be the only team that's been able to blow them out this year. So, again, I think this is a game that just sets up well for the Broncos to have a really good game.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And, we haven't even talked about it on here, but probably bring it back. What do you think about this Kareem Jackson stuff? And Trey Marshall, I think, is the one who's going to be taking over for the last 2 games.
Yeah. Disappointed in him.
Yeah. I
mean, anybody that makes that mistake, it's just kind of going, why? That's stupid. Especially for an NFL player who has the NFLPA, I think, pays for rides for him. Yeah. So they have to actively make a decision to, hey, I'm going to give up the free ride and drive my car home. And so, again, just disappointed, especially in a veteran that's been in the league for a long time, should know better. I'm not going to sit here and say I've not made big mistakes in my life. I've never drove drunk. I'll say that, but I've made plenty of mistakes that I'm kind of going, yeah, that was not smart. So I'm not going to sit here and say the guy should just be thrown off the team or anything like that. But you hope that he learns from this. I appreciate that he at least stood up and said, hey, I messed up. He didn't try to make excuses for it. He just said, I messed up. So I at least appreciate that kind of maturity after making a bad mistake. You see a lot of people who compound it and say, well, that's not my fault. The blah, 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 blah happened. That's why it's happening. It's this person's fault. He didn't do that. So I at least appreciate that side of it.
I agree with you there. So it stinks. Luckily, the Broncos aren't going to be in any position to miss him the rest of the season. You know, it's essentially preseason from here on out. Things you can take here, but Kareem Jackson, rest up. We'll see you next year, essentially, is how I feel about it. So, all right, Carl. Well, I think we should probably get to our big board here. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, it sounds good to me, man.
So, top 20. I think the best way to do it is you should give me your top, what do you say, 2 at a time?
Sure.
2 at a time, and then we'll go down from 20 up to 1. So, your 20 and your 19th players are?
I have Kenneth Murray, and I'm going to butcher this name, Prince Wanofo.
PTW.
There you go. PTW.
Prince Tega Wanugo.
Wanugo. Okay. I knew I was going to mess up that one. Yep. I mean, Murray, he has been showing that he is really the heart of that Oklahoma defense. I know they haven't been great this year, but they've been better. And he's got that athleticism that you really like at the linebacker spot that the Broncos are kind of lacking right now. He's shown pretty decently in coverage. I mean, I think he's a guy that's really trending up with his game this year. And then PTW, I've actually been a little more impressed with him than sometimes Austin Jackson. I think he's been a little bit more consistent this year. I think Jackson has higher upside, but I've seen too many games where I watch Austin Jackson and I sit there and say, man, he is leaning. He is reaching for a defender instead of really trusting his technique to win. Where with PTW, I've seen a lot more this year of growth in his technique and what he's doing on the field, and just really love when I see players grow like that throughout their career in college, because at least it shows that they're working at their game and that they are going to keep working on it when they get to the pros. So those are my 20 and 19. What about you?
Interesting. Neither of those players make it into my top 20. My number 20 player is Laviska Shenault Jr. Obviously, injuries are going to be a concern there, and he could fly up after the combine. But right now it's the durability stuff that concerns me. And also, he's not the best route runner. That said, when you have a wide receiver who, after the catch, turns into Derrick Henry, that's a sight to behold. He's 6'2", 220, the athleticism he plays with, the tenacity, the yak ability. Absolutely love his game, and I could see him moving up here. I'm a little bit concerned with durability. Again, best ability is your availability.
Right.
My number 19 player is Alex Leatherwood, the offensive lineman from Alabama. He plays left tackle this season, played right guard last season. Honestly, I think he could probably do either at a decent level, probably starts year 1 at guard. But that versatility, that potential upside of playing tackle does bring some nuance. I think he's a good athlete. I think he's a guy who's showing that cross-training ability is huge for me. And the fact that he is a good athlete, I think he's scheme versatile as well. So I like his game. I know some people have projected him recently in the top 10. Don't like him that much, but I think he's got a chance to be a good offensive lineman for a long time. And, that in itself has its weight in gold. So those are my 20 and 19th.
Okay. I like him. I have both those players on my board. Just a little bit higher.
It'll be interesting.
I have Alex Leatherwood 18, so we're one off right there. And I guess we should say real quick, this is a non-quarterback big board.
Oh yes, probably a good thing to say.
Yeah, no quarterbacks made this board.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, since the Broncos probably aren't going to be taking a quarterback early in this draft, most likely, unless something crazy happens these last 2 weeks. But then I have Creed Humphrey at 17. And so 2 offensive linemen, 2 different positions. But I like Leatherwood's game. Like I said, it's not – I don't think he has the upside of a lot of these other guys. I think he's going to be a pretty consistent player. You're going to know what you're going to get. And it's going to be above average play, I would say, at the position. And like I said, you could kick him inside if that's where you'd rather have him. He's got that versatility, so he does add that at least to the picture. And then Creed Humphrey – one of the better interior players, if not the best interior player in this draft. And a guy, I don't know, I have a tough time wanting to take an interior guy early in the draft, just because it's so much easier to find that position compared to tackle. And so that lowers him, even though probably the talent wise should lift him up a little bit more in my board. But I just, like I said, I have some trouble taking him unless we really trade back. and, end of the first round or trade back in, maybe that's a place to go get a guy like that. Or second round, I don't think he'll make it there though. So I
wouldn't. I love the center class too much. Too much depth. You can get a good guy day 2, even day 3 maybe.
Yeah.
So that's my thought at least.
No, I'm with you, and that's kind of where I'm leaning to. But that'd be my 18 and 17 for you.
All right, my 18 is Austin Jackson. I disagree with you as far as his rawness compared to Prince Tega Wanugo. I think Prince Tega is much more raw with his hand placement, and I do think Austin Jackson has a tendency to lean, but I think his body composition and the tools are out of this world, and he gets away with leaning even, which is insane to me. I'm really excited to see him versus AJ Epinesa in the upcoming game, and I love him as a fit in this scheme, and he could have a redshirt season year 1 even, and he could be 2021 starting left tackle. So I really do like Austin Jackson. He comes in there 18 for me. Number 17 for me, Grant Delpit. Now I know the Broncos don't need safety, but Grant Delpit is a guy with enough traits that I can't keep him out of the top 20 on my board. The ball skills, the range, the instincts, those are all there. And at that point, it's almost too much value to let slip. Now, I see him projected to the Broncos sometimes. I see him projected from 8 to 12. Would not touch him there. But at 17, just too much talent for me to skip on there. And I know the tackling has been an issue this year, but he's had an ankle issue. And he's not Derwin James, but a lot was made about Derwin James's inconsistency his last season, coming off that ACL, playing injured still. And that could reflect a little bit with Delpit as well. So just too talented to not have here. I'm not looking to go safety, but again, it's a big board for a reason, so I have him here at 17.
Well, he didn't make my board.
Okay.
I thought about him, but I guess maybe it's a little bit of just being so mad that people mock him to the Broncos in the top 10 that I'm just like, I'm not even going to have him on my top 20 board. How do you feel about that?
17 is pretty low.
Yeah. So no, there is talent. Don't get me wrong, for sure. He's not a great fit because of his lack of tackling from the safety position. And positional need obviously plays into it as well. Yeah. That most likely the Broncos are keeping Simmons. I mean, Elway, Fangio, pretty much everybody in the Broncos organization said that Simmons is going to be a Bronco. So I kind of trust that if everybody's saying it, probably good chance he's going to have it. But I'll go 16 and 15 here. I have Javon Kinlaw and Christian Fulton. Javon Kinlaw, just one of the more just devastating defensive linemen in this draft by far. I mean, really, there'd only be one other defensive lineman I'd rank above him, which, I mean, that's the case on my board. Just his ability to penetrate and just mess up an offensive game plan is just something to behold. I can't wait to watch him at the Senior Bowl. Yeah, just one of my favorite players to watch, but he is raw. So, I mean, he'd be one of those guys that the Broncos took in the first. You got to understand, it's probably going to take a year before you really start seeing the production show up with this kid. And then 15 with Christian Fulton, not the best fit at cornerback, but he did improve as the season went on. And you see the talent. And I still go back to coaching. The Broncos, where they are strongest in some of their coaching is in the secondary. And I mean, that's Fangio and the Broncos really, that's an area that they can plug and play some players and get more out of them than you would think. And so I could feel like a guy like Fulton coming in, he could still do a lot of good things for this defense.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that a lot. My number 16 player is Dylan Moses, linebacker from Alabama. He has not played a snap this season, but I've gone back and watched his 2018 tape, and boy howdy, he is absolutely juiced up. And the thing I like about him is he is super instinctual and he's physical. I know a lot will be made about Isaiah Simmons and his tools and how, he's kind of that back end chess piece, but that kind of concerns me almost a little bit with this defense, especially with how much they demand their linebackers to come up and fill in the gap and be in run support. You can't have a guy who has questions there. You just can't get away with it. It's a defense where those linebackers, if they don't fill properly, you're going to get absolutely blown up. I mean, it's what we saw against the Jags, week 4 before A.J. Johnson finally made his appearance. It was hideous. So I really love Dylan Moses. And the only reason he's not higher, granted, didn't play this year, but waiting on those medicals. But I think he is special. He'd be up there with Devin Bush and Devin White. I think if he'd played this season, he's a freak. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I just don't have him on my board, and it's because of the medicals.
Yeah.
Until I know more about that and where he's in his recovery, it's hard for me to really put him in this group of players. So I agree. The talent is there. I mean, if he is back to full health, man, go get that guy, because he is special. And like I said, I might even have him above Isaiah Simmons, just because he's such a great fit, a true 3-down player that can come down, help in the run game, help in the pass game, all of that. But right now, it's just hard for me to have him in that group until I see the medicals.
Yeah, nope, I agree. But he was too talented that I couldn't not have him on here. So 16 for me, Dylan Mobus. Number 15, same as you, Carl. I got Christian Fulton. I do like he's one of the better guys as far as his instincts and how oily he is in his hips. I mean, he can play press man, he can play off man, he can play zone. He's got good recognition there. My biggest concern is he's not always the best tackler, which would be an issue in this defense, no doubt. But I think because of his skills to cover and play not only man but zone as well, which, this isn't a pure zone defense. We saw the Broncos try to do both last week to no avail against the Chiefs, but you got to be able to do a little bit of both, and I think he's got the skills to do both, and I really like his overall skill set. I wish he was a little bit more physical, but he's a really good cornerback, and you'd be happy to have him in your depth chart in the corner room, because you need 3 good bodies out there, and he's definitely a attack in the right direction in that regards.
I like it. All right. My next 2 here, both cornerbacks. I have Shaun Wade and Trayvon Diggs. And I love both of these guys. They both bring something a little bit different than the other. Wade brings that versatility to play inside and outside. But I guess I feel a little bit like right now the Broncos really need to focus on getting a true outside cornerback. They just...
I think Wade would play outside if he didn't play at Ohio State.
Right. And I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying that's part of a little bit of, for me, Trayvon Diggs, that size 6'2", just his athleticism. I mean, he's a 4'3", 40 most likely kind of guy. He can fly. And to have that at the cornerback position to really line up with some of these big wide receivers, such a huge tool to have in the NFL. And so I like Trayvon Diggs. You've kind of made me more of a believer. I watched him. What game was it? Was it against LSU where he kept getting beat a little bit?
He got beat by Jamar Chase a number of times in that game, but
yeah,
to be quite frank, I don't think there's very few cornerbacks in the NFL that would be holding up with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Right. Well, I went back and watched more, and really there's a lot of those plays where he's in perfect position, but it is a perfect throw and a receiver making a big play. Yeah. And perfect coverage doesn't beat a perfect throw.
Yep.
So, I think he's been one of the more unlucky cornerbacks this year, because he's actually had some plays made against him, but he's always in perfect position. Just some perfect throws, again, have been made on him. So I think he'd be great for this defense. He's physical. He has no problem coming up and helping in the run game. And so I really like him. He's been climbing my board more and more every time.
Well, this will be boring, but my 14 and 13 players are the same, Carl. Shaun Wade at 14 and Trayvon Diggs at 13. So
there we go.
You hit it well. I think Shaun Wade will have a chance to rise up. I did hear Dane Brugler say that Shaun Wade has some background questions as far as maturity goes, so that's something to watch. But I really like Shaun Wade's game, kind of that nickelback player / boundary safety or boundary corner. I think there's a lot to like there. There are some questions about his ability to play boundary, but that's because Damon Arnett was a guy who's been doing well there. Top 100 prospect in his own right. And then the best cornerback in the game is the other boundary corner. So I like Shaun Wade a lot. I think he fits the defense. Trayvon Diggs, just a little bit more known there, more ball skills. So I agree with you. I'm going to keep the ball rolling here. My 12 and 11 player, I have Isaiah Simmons as my 12th player. I like the skill set. I love the athleticism. I do have some questions about him, like I talked about earlier. And I've seen some people talk about him as a top 5 player. I don't love him that much, I guess, but he's a very fun one, and I wouldn't be surprised if he blows up the combine, and he could rise up my board too. I just have some scheme / fit questions with him, so that just pushes him down a little bit. But again, you're tired of getting beat by Travis Kelce. Isaiah Simmons could be the answer to that. So definitely something to look for there. My number 11 player, much higher than you are on him, Javon Kinlaw, interior defensive line from Southern Carolina, a guy who was homeless in parts of high school, living in a car, and still pretty new to the game of football. And he didn't have his best game. He's lived up to better competition this season. I mean, against Alabama, against Georgia, he was a man possessed, getting pressure, getting sacks. I mean, absolutely. The tools are insane. Tools are crazy good. It's just the consistency isn't there right now, but he's going to be at the Senior Bowl. I'm excited to see him, and I value difference makers in the trenches. I mean, that's a takeaway that I've gained from watching the Niners, watching the Eagles. You know, these teams have continually poured early resources in the trenches, and I think Kinlaw has a chance to be a blue chip player there. And not only that, but he can get after the passer as well. So I like Kendell a lot. I have him as my 11th overall player.
All right. Well, I have Isaiah Simmons one higher than you at 11, but my number 12 is Laviska Shenault.
Okay.
And I know, like I said, the medicals, if the medicals check out, he should be very, very high on the Broncos board. I mean, just a true unique weapon at the wide receiver position. There's not many wide receivers that are built like him. That can do what he does on the field. And so again, adding that kind of weapon, it just makes defenses have to play you differently. And you can't just load up the box and pretty much say, okay, we're going to double a couple of these other guys, beat us with anybody else. He can do anything that you want him to do. So again, that's just a great talent to have. Isaiah Simmons, again, just a unique weapon. I think that's part of the problem is just he's maybe too unique. You got to get him paired with a creative defensive coordinator. And I do think Fangio would know how to use him and would use him well, but he's not a perfect fit in that 3-down linebacker that you're looking for. I'm going to keep going though. AJ Epinesa is my number 10. And he is a guy that I think can add a little bit of size so he can play that defensive end that can kick in to the 3-tech when they go into pass rush situations. He is just really showing so much of what he can do as the season closes out. He's just getting better with each game and just really looking like really if Chase Young wasn't a part of this draft, and maybe he won't be. He says that he's possibly returning for his senior year. We'll see about that. But no, Epinesa, he would be getting talked about a lot more if it wasn't for Chase Young. And then my number 9 is Henry Ruggs III. And he's been climbing my board a lot more. I was a little hesitant with him just because, I mean, he is that deep ball threat. But the more you watch him, you realize he's so much more. And it's almost, I feel bad for Alabama just has too many weapons. And so Ruggs hasn't been able to be featured because there's so many other things going on around that just it's kind of like, well, just pick your poison of who you're going to throw it to on this play. I think if Ruggs was truly the focus of an offense, you would see this guy and just go, wow, I can't believe he's doing those things on the field. I mean, just that absolute burner of speed. He makes angles for defenders look terrible. How many times guys think that they have a great angle on him and he just embarrasses them. So I'm coming more and more around to the idea of even maybe moving Henry Ruggs to my number 2 receiver in this draft.
So your number 10 was AJ Epinesa and your number 9 was Henry Ruggs?
Yep.
Well, God damn it, Carl. So is mine.
Boom.
We need to get some contrarians on here or something that supposedly makes for better radio. Too much echo chamber going on here. But again, Epinesa, is he an edge rusher? Is he going to be more of that 5 technique? I think you're fine either way. I mean, Von's going to be 30, so if you want to have a heavy-handed power rusher, kind of that perfect, I mean, he fits that Trey Flowers mold in that regard. If you're playing him on edge, you can do that. But also, I think he's strong enough at the point of attack. He can 2-gap. He can beat guys with power inside. I mean, Iowa moved him around the offensive line this season. Honestly, I think a lot of his best reps came as a kind of a 4-eye going up against a guard or inside a tackle's shoulder, and he can win there. So I really like Epinesa in this defense. I think people are sleeping on him right now in a 3-4 defense. I mean, is he ever going to be the overwhelming size guy, mass at the point of attack? No, but he's so good with his hands and powerful and plays with leverage that he can get away with that. He's not Akeem Hicks, but he can be a Justin Smith. And then number 9, I have Henry Ruggs as well. Speed, 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 but not just speed. I love his tenacity. He shows a good catch radius. He can be good after the catch, and he gets after it as a blocker. I mean, he competes every snap, and I love that about him. So I like Ruggs a lot. I got him at 9, and if you can get a guy like that paired with Sutton, you're going to have space and the chance for big plays where Drew Lock, he doesn't even have to do anything exceptional. He can just he can go play point guard and let his playmakers make plays.
There you go. All right, well, 8 and 7 here. I will go number 8, Jeffrey Okudah, the other cornerback for Ohio State. Not the perfect scheme fit, but just too much talent. It'd be difficult to keep him out of your top 10 list. He's not asked to do a whole lot of zone coverage, and when he has been, he hasn't been perfect at it. But again, I trust my coaches to go out there and make this guy shine in what he can do. And the Broncos have asked a lot more man coverage than I thought they would this year, because they like Chris Harris being able to follow that number 1. And if you lose Chris Harris and say, hey, we need another number 1 that can go follow guys and be that man coverage guy, you're not going to find much better than Okudah. And so I have him at 8. Number 7, Andrew Thomas. I know this is a guy that's been kind of moving down a lot of boards of people kind of questioning his scheme fit, and just he hasn't had the best season by any means compared to what people thought he was going to do, but he's still a talent there at the left tackle spot. And it's still a guy that's you got to have up there that you'd love to be able to plug and play in this offense and say, okay, I'm going to trust this guy to go out there, and he's, his technique is pretty darn spot on. He can be a little bit slow footed at times. He's just not as aggressive as some of these other guys that I'm going to talk about at the offensive tackle spot, but he's still a good player.
Alrighty, well, my number 8 player is Jerry Jeudy. I like him a fair amount, but with the depth of this class, I just don't love him. He's had some issues battling the football this season. He separates well, but I just worry about his physicality. I don't want to build a team around finesse players. This seems like a team that wants to be more power, more, in your face, smash mouth. I mean, from the offensive line to the defense, all of it speaks more smash mouth than finesse. And I see Jeudy as more of a finesse player. That being said, his yak ability, his ability to separate is all very good. He'd complement Courtland Sutton very well. He'd be a very good wide receiver for this team. I just don't love him. I mean, he's a top 10 player on my board. I love him, but there's a difference there. And my number 7 player, also Andrew Thomas. There's some questions. Is he going to be able to play left tackle in the NFL? Is he going to move into guard at the NFL? I've heard some questions with that. And does he fit a zone scheme? All those, I think, are valid questions. He's got probably the best technique of any of the tackles in this season, and you don't want to be honeypotted by athleticism. There is something to be said about that. I mean, some people question Ramchek's upside, but he had great technique, and he comes in easily coming in right away and being a good tackle, and then people honeypotted by the athleticism upside of Bulls. So there's something to be said there, but I got to trust my eyes for now. He just doesn't have the pass blocking upside. Might be a right tackle, might be a gap heavy scheme tackle. So got him at number 7. Number 6, I actually have Jedrick Wills at my number 6. More powerful than Thomas at the point of attack. I think he moves better than Thomas and was the blindside blocker at Alabama despite being the right tackle. So I have no issue with him at right tackle or left tackle. And just the length, the power, the tenacity that he plays with. He's going to be a good one for a really long time, I think. I've been very impressed with his tape this season. So Jedrick Wills is my number 6. Number 5, I got CeeDee Lamb, my wide receiver 1. I really love CeeDee Lamb. He does remind me of DeAndre Hopkins. He's got great ball skills. He's a menace after the catch. I mean, he looks like Alvin Kamara to me. The way he can change directions and drop his hips and the balance he plays with, insane. And he also just brings it every single snap as a blocker. So I didn't used to be as much of a CeeDee Lamb fan. I thought he was more of a pure boundary guy, but I think the upside is there to continue to improving his route running, considering how he can change direction. And that on top of the blocking, the ball skills, the yak, I just think he's a complete weapon, and he's my number 1 skill player in this class. Then it's not that close for me.
All right. Well, I have Jerry Jeudy at 6. And, I mean, you've already talked about what he brings to the table. And then I have at number 5, Jedrick Wills. He has been one of my highest risers on my board, just really showing more and more just what he brings to the table and just that true power. I mean, he just destroys people. Yeah, you love his heavy hands at that offensive tackle spot. His feet, pretty good. Not the best, but he's still pretty darn good at movement skills, and just seems to be getting better and better. So definitely like him. Number 4, I was telling you earlier, my top 4 spots are all 4 different positions. So it's kind of interesting how that worked out. But I have at number 4, Derek Brown. And I mean, this guy, he is, if there's a player that was built for Fangio's defense, it's Derek Brown. I mean, he has that size that he loves. He has that ability to two gap in the run game. He has the ability to move all over the place. I mean, they have him playing at edge sometimes in college at 320 pounds. And I mean, he can play any position you want him to. He can get after the quarterback. He's got the ability to bend around the edge. How does a guy at 320 pounds sink his hips like that? I don't know. I don't know. But again, he is like the perfect specimen for a Fangio defense on the defensive line. And then at 3, I have CeeDee Lamb. You've already talked about what he brings to the table. He's one of my favorite wide receiver prospects I've ever watched. I usually don't go for those bigger guys. I like the Jerry Judys more, just because that's the kind of wide receiver I was when I was playing.
The thing is, Carl, he's not that big.
He's not huge, but he's not like 5'10". He's not the quick footed, get open in 3 yards kind of guy.
He's similar size to Jerry Jeudy. It's just he plays with the heart of a lion. It's insane.
That's true. And I've liked Lamb since he came into college. I remember watching him as a freshman going, that guy's going to be something. And you and I talked about it last year that with Oklahoma, he was not, or Brown was not their best. Yeah, he was not their best wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb. And Brown is a good receiver, don't get me wrong, but Lamb just brings so much more versatility to what you're doing on offense. And again, just teams would have to absolutely respect the Broncos knowing that they have 2 true number 1 wide receivers. Lamb has that top 5 wide receiver in the NFL upside. And I have no doubt that he's going to get close to that. But I'll finish it off here for my top 2 then. Tristan Wirfs, I mean, best tackle in the class. Can play left tackle, right tackle, good in the run game, great in the pass game, just has it all. I mean, just there's not much to not like about his game, and it sounds like he's actually a pretty darn good guy on top of it. And then Chase Young, not exactly a need, but too much talent not to have him at number 1.
Yep, I agree with you there. My number 4, Jeffrey Okudah, cornerback, Ohio State. Just the length, the ability to change direction, the nuance in man coverage, the physicality that he has. This guy has upside to be one of the best cornerbacks in football for a long time. And I know he isn't as clean of a fit in a pure zone scheme, but that was more of a question last year. He showed a little bit better there this season. I have no doubt that with his tools and what he has, that he can get better there. And the ball skills, it's just, the only question is how good is he in zone? It's just because they don't ask him to do that. You know, when you're that good in man and you have that many talented guys on your defense that can play man up with the pass rush that they have, why not play man coverage? So I love Jeffrey Okudah's game. I do wish sometimes he's a little bit better carrying routes vertically, but we are really nitpicking here in that regard. My number 3, Derek Brown, you talked about it. Love him, the length, the burst, the pass rushing, the one gapping, the two gapping. I mean, there's an argument to be had that he could have been the number 1 defensive tackle. His tape this season can be put up against anybody from last season. Doesn't have the production that you saw from Quinnen Williams last year, but I think he's got more raw tools. And we've seen Quinnen Williams struggle a little bit this year. Granted, I think he's only 21 years old, and there's some flashes there still. It's just there's not much else on that Jets offense or defensive line, especially at edge. But Derek Brown, I mean, just all the tools, the length, everything you could ever want from a defensive lineman. Tristan Wirfs, my number 2. Massive upside. It's not always the most put together technically right now, but 6'5", 330. Bruce Feldman's number 1 freak in all of college football. I think you give this guy to Mike Munchak, and you have yourselves a Trent Williams-esque player for the next decade. And then number 1, Chase Young, freak player. Broncos got no chance at him, but he should be on the top of anybody's board that isn't listing quarterbacks. So, all right, Carl, any surprises there for you?
No, they all make sense to me. Any from my board?
I was surprised you were as high on Shenault as you were.
Yeah, just the more you watch him, the more you're just impressed with what he can do just by himself. I mean, he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he's got some speed to him. He's got good hands. He's got ability in the open field that just is hardly matched by anybody else in this class. His ability, there was one play I watched. He carried like 3 guys with him for 5 yards. And you're just going, a wide receiver should not be able to do that. And so as much as the injury concerns concern me, I still think that this guy is just an absolute unique talent that would be very difficult for teams to take on every week.
Makes sense. All right, folks. Well, we're running long. That's what happens when you get to have to pack draft talk with, the regular season. But regular season's going to be gone soon, and we're going to miss it. So I'm going to cherish what we can while we can. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at CarlDumblerMHH and myself at KendellMHH. Make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at MileHighHuddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.